Hello and welcome to the 2018 New Zealand Festival of Motor Racing, all with thanks to the team at Four Guys Autobarn. It's a great celebration of the rich history of the sport in these parts. Over time, we've looked back on the wonderful marques, Porsche, BMW and Ferrari, and celebrated some of the great drivers as well, the likes of Bruce McLaren and Kenny Smith. For 2018, something different. It's all about the legends of Bathurst. Over time, the Kiwis have really made their mark at the mountain. Bathurst has a huge following in New Zealand.
It's the one race of the year that whether you follow motor racing or you don't, you know about that weekend. Our industry has been built on that race since the 40s and the 50s. Every kid that starts in go-karts one day wants to race at Bathurst, so it's a very special place.
Everybody that's anybody in motorsport wants to drive at Bathurst. My first Bathurst was 1965. Like, look at it now, it's got safety barriers everywhere. It had trees and wire fences back in those days. But it's special to drive on. It's not just a normal circuit.
In 74, it was just barbed wire to stop you going over the edge of the bank. But young and enthusiastic, you didn't care. That was a racetrack, you drove around it. You weren't going to go off, because you don't go off, you know. Of course you do, but you kid yourself. But it was just an iconic track. We'd heard all about it. We weren't overawed by any means, but we were happy to be there and happy just to get a result.
You look at the GT racing now, all the stars want to come and do the GT race, the 12-hour race. All the stars want to be the second driver in the VA supercars now, because it's special and it's a driver circuit.
It was the one that got me, in my mind, that's where I want to be. And I landed up there.
It's one of the toughest races in the world to win. You know, there's so many changing conditions, let alone keeping your car going. Always enjoyed going there, always a challenge, mental challenge, physical challenge. Enjoyed every lap.
The track is special, and there's very few racetracks in the world now that are that special, that are made out of public roads. But having said that, we're here at Hampton Downs, and this is a great little racetrack. It's a credit to the blokes that first started it, and an absolute credit to Tony Quinn for making it now what it is. So I'm absolutely rapt to be here.
The Kiwis, and I guess I'm a Kiwi, but they're so passionate and so involved in their own domestic product. And a lot of the guys that have these cars here, they've specifically gone out and sought the right car to bring back to New Zealand. So we've got a great history of motor racing in Australia, but in New Zealand it just seems to be that little bit more passionate.
Whether you smell the fumes or not, but the excitement of seeing their cars, seeing people walk around and loving what they're looking at, it just reignites the feeling that you had when you were a younger guy.
It's pretty special to be here, and I think as far as the spectator facilities, I think looking after the VIPs, which is, I suppose, is us, like, it's never been done any better than this. I think we'll see a lot of historic racing and a lot of the ambassadors of the sport being used a lot more, because Tony Quinn's just absolutely excited about us being here.
I'm happy to slow down a bit nowadays, and this is just genuine fun. The result doesn't matter. If someone's having a battle with you, you give them room like you always do. But motor racing now in the front and the serious championships is cut and thrust, and I'd much rather do this.
Fantastic facility, and the reaction to the theme of this event, the Legends of Bathurst, has been very well received, hasn't it?
I think it's gone better than they expected. I think the people that come and get autographs signed today, I think when you look at the cars that are running here, and a lot of historic old cars, beautiful cars running, and the circuit suits them. It's a fairly long circuit for the cars, and for Stewie to have the GDR out there blazing around, that's pretty special for Alan Heath and I, because we've helped him, you know, develop the car and get the car to where it is. It's a replica. He started with a body shell. He's built this car out of nothing, really. But the thing is, we've assisted him with things he wanted, like shock absorbers and things like that.
What does it evoke for you in terms of memories? Because in your second attempt, you finished second at the mountain. The following year, you won the 500, and you went on to enjoy some great success as a team owner as well. What was more fulfilling?
The whole value of the whole lot, Greg, I think, really, because like our first race there was in an MJ twin cam in a 6-hour race, sports car race, and Gagans were running an SP250 Daimler. And I remember the car going around the circuit and the right-hand side front door would fall open every time because the body twisted so much. And Fatty had to close the door. The next year, I never met Harry till the Friday night at Bathurst. Never driven the car till Bathurst till Friday practice. And I thought Harry was going to be the lead driver, but I finished up being the lead driver. And don't forget, there was no radios back in those days. So Harry's directing traffic by thumbs up or thumbs down, you're going all right. I enjoyed driving there, but when I retired and took over the Nissan team in '85, I was excited about the prospects. If the product was good enough, we could win some races. And as we did, we won some races. Even the DR30 Skyline we had, which wasn't the best car in the world, wasn't homologated properly, and it was up against a pretty hard competition. We got good results with that car there. And then we went to the HR31, and then the GTR blew them away. Oh, you look at that, you think about why we race Bluebird to start with. They want to build Bluebirds in Australia, they want to race Bluebirds in Australia. Simple as that. What the product was, they wanted to have it through Motorsport. When we're in Skyline, they wanted to race Skyline. That's why when GTR come in, we're having these handicap problems, and Larry bluing, everyone bluing. We took them to court there one time for the weights they're going to have. All that sort of stuff. It was very, very difficult, but Nissan were very happy to support the thing, and especially like guys like Leo Daphne. And if you saw him there the last time they won, when Jim was very rude at the podium, he was downstairs in the crowd with an umbrella, bashing a couple of journos with the umbrella because they were giving him a bad time. So he was very passionate about what we did in motorsport. And also, we were much better as a GTR than the Japanese GTRs. Our rules were the same, but we developed better than they did. They might have 550 horsepower, we had 650 horsepower, all done in-house. And that's why when we got offered to go to Fuji one year, next day I had a phone call from Kakimoto-san, boss of Motorsport. He said, Fred, I believe you've been invited to go to Fuji. I said, yes, I have, Kakimoto-san. He said, not a good idea. He said, we look after domestic and Japanese, you look after Australia and New Zealand. But we had a good relation with those sort of people, like Kakimoto-san. They were just good people.
If you were at Bathurst in the 1970s, you were probably either a Peter Brock fan or an Alan Moffat supporter, the two drivers really symbolising the Holden versus Ford rivalry that the sport and the event became famous for. He, of course, won the great race no less than 4 times, including that very memorable 1977 1-2 finish for the Ford Motor Company. He raced successfully for other marques too, like Mazda, and is a proper legend at the mountain.
I appreciate that because I'm retired at the moment. Nobody's bothering me. And I've really been impressed with everybody's attention to what I used to do. A lot of people thought Peter and I were enemies. Well, we weren't. We weren't enemies. And when he went out and did something, I always had the greatest regard for him. A lot of people got Brocky mixed up with what they thought they should be thinking.
Behind us, of course, here is a car that celebrates another period of your career, a time with Mazda. People still love these cars today.
Well, and it's a credit to them because we only ever put 2 engines in over 200 races. I never touched a thing hardly. When I had the headman from Japan to come out and we gave him his new jacket, and that was the obvious starting point, I said, well, we'll have 2 engines, that's fine. Bugger me, a month later, 4 more engines arrived. Look how neat and tidy the combination is. Engine comes back to this far only. The 2 little things that are running it are there, just one there and one there. And you think, well, when I first saw it, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. But the moment I got in it, it went like a rocket.
Dickie Johnson wasn't overly complimentary at times of them, though, was
he? No, because he thought I was doing something, in Afghanistan or somewhere and, tightening up everything the wrong way. And as soon as the other drivers started putting you-know-what, S-H-I-T, I just said, well, fine, you guys do your own thing. One of the things that everybody never understood, the car itself was quite light.
Yes.
I didn't have to work that bloody hard. I didn't have to work that hard. And particularly when we went to Western Australia, even going to Sandown, get your foot down and get going. Don't wait for them to come and bloody kiss your what?
While this edition of the New Zealand Festival of Motor Racing is very much about the legends of Bathurst and some of the great cars that have raced at Mount Panorama over the different eras, there is a strong racing component. And the NZ Central muscle cars are a real crowd pleaser, a real draw card. Some fantastic muscle cars here, big horsepower. They've been to the mountain before along with the Touring Car Masters, and they're hopeful of heading back there again.
It was a real honour, and it was great that the Australians invited us over, and it was a great show to have 50-odd cars, of this calibre running around the mountain, and I think it's something a lot of people won't forget.
We'd been to Eastern Creek a couple of times as a club, and that was great, and then the opportunity came up to get to Bathurst, and our category had fun. It's very much what Central Muscle Cars is all about. A lot of participation. We've got 30 cars here this weekend, and all well-presented cars, nicely looked after, and guys having fun.
It's the variety of cars and just the rawness of them. A lot of power, not much fire, and they're an awesome gig to drive. You throw them around and they hang on, and yeah, heaps of fun.
At the end of the day, these cars are so unique because they all sound different as well. They've all got their own different sound, they all handle different, They're actually a hard car to drive. They're all over the place. They've got tons of horsepower, get sideways around the corner, run out of brakes, all the rest of it. So it actually does take a bit of talent to drive them.
They are very, very fast. Lap times over the weekend have been astonishingly quick for old cars. It's got an 850 horse Roush Yates NASCAR engine, and it's a lot of fun.
4 Bathurst wins, a podium together with his dad, just some of the special moments in the career of Stephen Richards, which continues, of course, as he's competing in a BMW M6 in Australian GT. And this weekend, he has the chance to drive something special while maintaining those links. A rare BMW M3, once campaigned by Johnny Cicotto and Gianfranco Brancatelli.
Well, it's very cool. I haven't driven any Group A car before, really, ever. Even though Dad's had quite a few cars over the years, he never takes them out. I was there in '87 watching Bathurst, and that was probably when I was really just starting to follow car racing really properly with Dad. And to be driving the car, essentially, that Dad was racing all day long. You know, they were racing the CBM cars all day long. That's unreal. Very different though, no power steering. I'm having to build up the shoulder muscles again. Feels like a big go-kart. H-pattern gearbox on the wrong side of the car, but very, very cool. BMW connection for me obviously goes back to when Dad was running the cars, but they were the start of the iconic era of M cars for BMW. When you look at them now, they're quite simple, but in their day, they were the car to have. You know, they dominated the World Touring Car Championships around the world in that period. So to have a drive really is incredible.
I've been fortunate enough to see you win your 4 Bathursts. To get 1's pretty special, to get 4's incredible.
I mean, no question. In this part of the world, it's the measure of your performance. So very lucky. I've driven with great teams along the way, and you can't do it without being in the right car at the right time with the right drivers.
John Goss holds a special place in the history pages of Australian racing. He's the only man to win the 2 big races, both Bathurst and the Australian Grand Prix. His first victory in the 1000 at the Mountain came in 1974, and then he did it just over a decade later, driving for Jaguar. This weekend, he stepped back in time to drive a car that he raced in the early 1970s.
And I came here anticipating seeing the car again, but when I actually saw it yesterday, and I just did a bit of a check, and I thought, well, look, it's 47 years since it was built and 46 years since I raced it for the second year in 1972. And in that year, I was able to win the Sandown 250 in this very car. So it's pretty rare because it wasn't just a car that survived. This car won some major events and really put me on the road with Ford in those early 1970s. Freddie Gibson warned me. He said, you shouldn't be driving again, John. And I said, gee, I owe it to my own legacy and to the car. I got in the car and it was just exactly as it had been all those years ago. The car's a little bit softer than I remember, but it's not very far off the mark. The big limitation here today on this fairly compact circuit is these cars always had marginal brakes, to say the least. If you move yourself around, you can see there's no side support here, no headrest, you see, and we had a significant roll cage, which is not in the car at the moment. Don will retrieve it and fit it. The Ford strut for the cage came here, and we had an oil gauge taped onto it, and that's exactly where the gauge was. So that was the only additional instrumentation, which was strictly illegal in a series production car, but because of the oil surge limitations we had with the Cleveland engine, the scrutineers turned a blind eye on. So we used to drive the bloody car on the oil pressure gauge. Along the top of the mountain, you'd see that needle swinging back towards zero as you went through the corners. So there's a lot going on. But the cars were very physical. Just try and turn the steering wheel. No power steering, you know. The other thing too, this car, I was running down the Conrod Straight at 145 miles an hour. That's about 6,500 RPM in 4th gear. And it was a series production car. That's what we need to remember.
John Bowers' glittering career includes 2 Bathurst victories with an icon of the sport, Dick Johnson. Despite being known as a hero of the Blue Oval, John's love affair with the mountain kind of really began in a Volvo. And this weekend, he's taking a drive down memory lane.
Yes, last time I saw it at 86 October, Bathurst, and then the team was disbanded. It went back to Sweden because it was owned by Volvo. And Mark Petch, who started the Volvo team, he found it and had it restored. So it's sort of like the old band back together, except none of us can play music. Last year at Phillip Island Classic, it was the first time I'd actually seen it for 30 years. It was like meeting an old girlfriend, but she hasn't deteriorated. You know, the car still looks the same. And it still drives the same. It's quite funny. It's had some funny foibles back then, and it's still got them. Volvo were in factory Group A racing throughout the world. At the time, BMW made them, Holden homologated a Group A car. There were quite a lot of people around the world that raced Group A, the Jaguars. You had to sell 5,000 variants of a car, and then you're allowed to build 500 homologation cars. I'm not sure they ever built 500 of these, but they kidded someone they did. I'd forgotten how hard it was to drive this thing. I had a few little battles then, it was good. It's good fun, you know, like everybody's serious, but, you know, there's no shift stations. It's not going to change your life. But having spent a long time racing, you sort of think, oh, if we could just fix that, and the car would go a bit faster. It's silly, really, but people have been great.
While this weekend is a celebration of the legends of Bathurst, there are cars covering all eras and genres of motorsport. Representing arguably the pinnacle is Tony Quinn's 1995 Simtech Formula One car, the wonderful noise reverberating around the Hampton Downs circuit.
The scary things are way too fast for human beings. And I think the way the guys used to drive them so much, they used to practice every week. And you'd need to practice with that every week just to get used to I mean, your eyes just wobble about. Well, my eyes do. They wobble about and they can't focus. But I've got no idea how they drove them for an hour and a half. But they're good. They're good. They're very fast.
Also flying the open-wheeler flag are legendary car designers Adrian Reynard and good friend Malcolm Osler, both competing in the ultra-competitive historic Formula Ford category, Osler winning the weekend. The legendary 2-litre era of the British Touring Car Championship is well represented with Paul Radicic's 1994 World Cup winning Mondeo, the Tim Harvey BMW that won the infamous 1992 title fight, and the 1998 BTCC winning Ricard Rydell Volvo that also was driven to victory at Bathurst that year with Jim Richards at the wheel. The cars that raced at the mountain have inspired some replicas competing in the Four Guys Autobahn Legends of Bathurst race, with ex-V8 supercar Commodores and Falcons dicing with Group C and Group A cars. And the Heritage Touring Cars category is the home of not only a number of cars the legends are competing in, but also a fleet of classic Group A and 2-litre super touring cars. When you look through the history pages of the great race, the name Charlie O'Brien regularly appears driving for some major teams. The Holden dealer team, Alan Moffat's outfit, just to name a few. He went tantalisingly close to a podium during his career with the 1000. He's driving here this weekend and back to his winning ways in a Nissan Primera.
New Zealand motor racing has just been fantastic over the decades, isn't it? With Bruce McLaren and Danny Helm and Chris Amon and Kenny Smith, like, it's just amazing. And I first came over here in 1981 driving in the New Zealand Grand Prix in Roltz back in the Atlantic days. So I spent a lot of years here in the 80s and 90s and then came back in 2000 with the Porsches. So I feel like I'm a half a Kiwi. Murray Sinclair been good enough to let me have a drive of the car. It's fantastic. It's the first time in a front-wheel drive car. It's just a beautiful little car to drive and it's so quick through corners. So I'm having a ball. There's only about a tenth of a second between Jim's times and John Bowes. You know, I'm obviously driving a later model car. I'm ahead, which is the first time I think I've ever been ahead of Jim. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. So I'm not giving up this one.
Kiwi Paul Radicic is tenacious behind the wheel. He was brilliant in open wheelers as a youngster, but perhaps best known for reaching dizzy heights in touring car racing with 2 World Cup wins. Bathurst was cruel to Radicic. He went so close to winning in '99. Still, there were podiums and close ties with Dick Johnson Racing. Fittingly this weekend, he's driving a Falcon in the iconic blue Johnson colours.
It's an enjoyable weekend, a different pace of life, and just great to get behind the wheel of some of these old cars. And hey, I appreciate Dick Johnson and what he did in his time in this era, because they're not big horsepower, but you got to really drive them in that big heavy cars.
What was your reaction when you first drove it?
Where's the brakes? let alone everything else, and sort of back to that manual gearbox. But you know something, when you get in, you know, it's like the switches and the smells, and it all just sort of comes back. It's a bit like riding a bike, you know, it all sort of comes back to you, and then you can feel yourself slipping into that competitor mode, like maybe I'll just change a little bit faster and I'll brake a little bit later, and on the story goes. I'm probably the odd man out. I didn't get to win the great race. It was one of those things, disappointing and heartache, but hey, there was always next year. But of course there is no more next year, and it's probably the one thing that is definitely missing off my CV. So close, but it didn't quite get there.
I loved looking down the pit lane at the Mondeo. Does that evoke some special memories for you?
Oh, hell yeah, it does. You know, I mean, they were great days, and I think that era for me, you know, was Radice Super Touring. That's what I was known for, and that sort of lasted for about 20 years. It was a time when Formula One wasn't that good. All of a sudden, us lunatics hit the track and we're crashing and bashing into each other. You know, 10 manufacturers, 20 cars, the world's best drivers, and it was great to be part of that.
Jim Richards is a household name here in New Zealand with 7 wins at Bathurst. His achievements at the mountain are really the stuff of legend. It's a great story. And this weekend, he's been reunited with an old friend, the stunning BMW 635 that he campaigned in the 1980s.
It's the first car that I drove for BMW in 1982 with Frank Gardner. And then it changed engines for 83, 84 to a lot more powerful engine, which made us competitive in Group C with the Fords and the Holdens. It brings back terrific memories. I drove it at Bathurst with Frank. Unfortunately, we didn't finish, but that was a thrill. To drive it now, back in the guise that it was in those years, has been fantastic. It's the only car like this in the world, and that's because nowhere else in the world they run this type of class, and they only built one, so it's got some good history.
When you look up and down the paddock, there are some cars that your history is so representative in, from the Volvo that you succeeded in at Bathurst in the Super Tourer to that incredible restored Tirana.
The guy that actually built that car basically built it in Fred Gibson's workshop in Sydney, would you believe, is here today. We didn't have any expectations at all, and Rod Coppins, the owner of the car, and my friend, he got sponsorship from Southern Comfort at the last minute, and we didn't even have any wet weather tyres when the race started. We had to actually go and find some. And to finish third, I mean, we were over the moon. We were just happy to drive around and finish anywhere. The longevity, I think it is reinventing yourself. You know, when we were out of the Touring Car Championship in a regular drive, I started my own little team and drove production Porsches and just kept on going because I've always enjoyed the driving and the people around us. If you want to keep driving for a long time, you've all got to do something yourself, because no one's going to employ a 65, 70-year-old guy to drive their car. But in this class, the classic class, Peter Sturgeon from New Zealand here supplies the cars that I used to drive, more or less, and lets me have another drive with them. So I think the secret is just keep on keeping on.
That wraps up another fantastic New Zealand Festival of Motor Racing. We hope you've enjoyed it. Already the wheels are in motion for another great celebration of the legends of Bathurst next January. We can't wait for that. Thanks to Four Guys Autobahn for their support, and to you at home for watching as well. For the team here at Hampton Downs, I'm Greg Rust. Bye for now.